Nowadays, there are a lot of discussions about President Marcos Jr.'s foreign policy. Accordingly, there's also a lot of debate about the value and the implications of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. But to properly appreciate President Marcos Jr.'s foreign policy and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement between the Philippines and the United States, we have to also understand the bigger geopolitical context, particularly the new Cold War between China and the United States. And accordingly, we also have to understand not only the grand strategy of superpowers, particularly China, but we also have to figure out what could be the Philippines' grand strategy in order to survive and to thrive in the 21st century. In order to understand the new Cold War between US and China and what should be the focus of the Philippines in the coming decades in terms of its national security strategy, to better understand the way forward for the Philippines, we're going to talk to someone who really knows his stuff. Someone who served in the Philippine Navy at the highest levels, and someone who's educating the Filipino public on how we should move forward and thrive in a new Cold War era between US and China. Now, obviously, the Scarborough issue was a watershed, but so was President Duterte's term in office. It came as a shock to a lot of people that the Philippines would have a president like that. I'm not only talking about the drug war, but someone who would cause an American president, someone who would question the foundation of the administration. As someone who was serving in the Navy, how did you feel about that? I mean, like, suddenly we have a president like this. Did you feel it's just braggadocio? Was this just, rhetorical posturing? Or you felt something fundamental was going on, some foundational crisis in our alliance with the United States?
Hindi naman kaagad. As an institution, the armed forces that is supposed to be apolitical. So
sure,
whoever sits there as a president, that's your commander-in-chief.
But you also have constitutional duties, right? To defend the Philippine sovereignty.
But, you presume regularity of everything.
Right.
So you give that to him. That's your commander-in-chief. So of course, nung meron ng mga directives na parang, for me, I call it an ethical dilemma kasi you're receiving instructions that are legitimate instructions. But kung ibabangga mo doon sa constitutional mandate, parang disconnected na. Okay? So that's an ethical dilemma for us.
Right, medyo gray zone.
Nag-gray zone ka na, kumbaga. But of course, you have to follow orders. Kasi it's not illegal.
No, I mean, he's the commander-in-chief, right?
So it's not illegal. So you may not agree with it, but that's his call. Kumbaga, again, you presume na the man on the balcony has a greater,
and he has
a broader vista of
and
things.
He has a democratic mandate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I'm saying is that it's not just the talking. I mean, we canceled plans for joint patrols with the U.S. I remember that was a big issue being discussed 2014, 2015. I covered this as a journalist, starting writing about this issue 2011. So I remember things on a granular level. There was a lot of excitement on the joint patrols, and then suddenly Balikatan gets kind of bumped off or taken away from the maritime security aspects and just put on the HADR. Like, that must have been big for people in the Navy, right? Like, what's going on? Like, the whole momentum, all the plans we had on how to move forward is kind of out of the window. Boom. Not to mention the arbitration award is out now, which clearly says China has no business claiming these areas, and the Philippines kind of has more business being in those areas. That must have been a difficult moment, right? I mean, it's not only ethical. It's just maybe existential moment for some people, right? Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing it a little bit too dramatized, but that's how I saw it. I mean, from the outside, I'm looking at it as someone who understands it. Like, whoa, this is crazy, and for us from the outside, we have to explain this to the world. I imagine. I'm trying to imagine what it was for you people on the front line.
Well, it's like parang nakatali yung kamay mo.
Yeah.
And again, yung vacuum thing. We may not have the most modern ships at the time.
But still.
But the fact that we're patrolling before that, we have presence. Okay. Kumbaga, the analogy there is in your barangay there's a policeman, community policing. So as long as that policeman is walking the beat, kumbaga, yung community, siyempre yung mga criminal elements doon would stand out. Kumbaga, iwas yan eh. But when you say to the policeman, community policeman, you stop patrolling, what do you expect? So yun yung nangyari. And that was for 6 years.
So there is a cost. There's a cost. Now, the reason why I mentioned this, Admiral, is this, okay. I also hear this from people who work in both administration, meaning Marcos Jr. and Duterte. They keep on saying, no. If you look at it, all the drama actually gave leverage to us because it made the Americans take us more seriously and all. But I kind of see how it makes sense if you're not really familiar with the situation. But actually, if you're familiar with the situation, actually there were costs to what Duterte did, right? Suspending the patrols, suspending the Balikatan, not allowing the EDCA to be fully implemented for a very long time. We'll discuss EDCA more. That had a cost. And for me, if you want the U.S. to take you more seriously, did you have it to do it in the Duterte way? I can think of 1,000 other ways to get the American people's attention on this.
You know, Richard, you're the third person I heard that narrative in the past 2 days.
Right? Because it's becoming the thing, right? Yeah.
And I haven't heard that last week.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Baka coordinated yan.
So,
what's going on here? Yeah.
Maybe, they're trying to deodorize yung image of the former president and maybe paving the way
make it
for
smooth in terms of the departure. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So last week I haven't heard that narrative, but for the past 2 days, you're the third person I heard that.
On the record, I heard this first time more like 1 month ago. It's like, yeah. So I can send you the links and all. You know?
Okay.
I was like, that's an interesting way of looking. But for me, I think Duterte was a net negative for us when it comes to strengthening our position. He did some things right here and there, or Secretary Lorenzana did certain things right and there, but I think overall he was a net negative. I can imagine any other president would have, without all the Duterte School of Diplomacy, could have still made us more important to Americans without all the costs that we incurred. I mean, this is my take on the issue after obsessively writing and thinking about it. So I just want you to, what is your reading? Because you have good friends like, Jay Batumbakal, who also has written about the fishery aspects of it, that because we were not asserting ourselves as much, we're losing more than $600 million, conservative estimates, of fishing resources. A lot of that to IAU from China, right? To a certain degree, you can say Vietnam, etc. So I just don't get that argument that, no, Duterte, that was just a drama to set it up for Marcos. Like, I'm not sure it was coordinated that way. I think it was just by some accidents of history once Marcos came in. Medyo mas kailangan tayo ng America, which we'll talk about later on the Taiwan issue. What is your take? Because I want to see the take of a man who was in the ring, right?
I look at this as a publicity, maybe political in nature. The fact that it, as I said, I heard of it only the past 2 days.
Like it becomes more frequent,
And you said it came in last month.
Right.
So maybe it's maybe a political thing.
Right.
Kasi I didn't see that. And kumbaga, if we assess the past administration, you would say na as far as foreign policy, medyo problematic siya.
Problematic, definitely.
I mean, yung fundamentals lang problematic na. How much more now you're going to say na deliberation? There's a method to the madness during that time.
Right.
Parang that's
stretching.
That's stretching it
too far. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I find that interesting, but I'm saying it's like, no, I don't think it worked that way. I think we lost a lot. The fact that we did not assert the arbitration award early on, right away, we didn't build that coalition. I think we lost a lot of momentum. My sense is, of course, we're not going to name names. I felt a lot of confusion, demoralization among many people in the service. So yeah, I mean, it was very. Ganito kasi, just to be transparent, initially I supported Duterte raising those questions about ano bang ambag ng alliance na to. But I don't see the value of the answers he gave. I think the answers this is what we get with the populists, right? But probably Trump got it more correctly than Duterte in the sense that he didn't only ask big questions but got some of the methods right. I don't know, but my sense is with Duterte, I don't buy that argument. I just don't buy that argument. Now, this was all part of a grand design of him, setting it up, or Marcos Jr. should be thankful to Duterte that I'm just not sure about it, to be honest. I'm not. Because I can imagine 10,000 ways that this could have gone better for us,
Well, even before he became a president, mayor pa siya, we were fully aware that
of his nature.
He doesn't like the Americans.
He really doesn't like them.
In fact, in my previous life, I was also like Mike Lohico.
Right.
I do exercise planning. So
So executive agent?
Hindi naman executive agent. More of director planning.
Director plan, yeah.
So we made the point not to do Philippine-US exercises in Davao.
Yes, I know that. I
Yeah,
kind of like convinced the city council or something like that to kind of vote
we avoid
against.
the Americans say, can we do an exercise in Davao?
No,
No, dude, no way.
Doesn't work with that guy, yeah.
And that was
Back then
back then pa.
1990s pa to, di ba?
Hindi naman. Mga,
early 2000s,
during
sorry.
time
Early
of President
2000s. Yeah,
Pinoy's
yeah,
time. So, kumbaga, don't think of even that, no.
Oh, yeah, I think it's the air base in Davao that he didn't want to give to the Bush administration. So I had something else in mind. Yeah, yeah. Obama na yata yan yung
Kaya
kinansel
when he came in 2016, we were prepared for that.
You know what
okay,
this guy is all about. Yeah.
So we had some low-level consultations with the U.S. liaison here
right.
in Manila. Sabi ko, you're going to have a hard time when President Duterte comes in.
And my sense is they were not taking him seriously enough. The Americans thought he's just like another loudmouth who's gonna, be shaped by the office once he's there. Yeah.
Well, they were trying to be optimistic about situations.
Right.
Of course. Kaya ang we ended up, sabi ko, okay, low-level discussions, nothing formal. Sabi ko, let's consider a proxy. Sabi ko, Japan. If they kick you out, can you ask Japan to come in as yung more of an active partner? Kasi at that time, President Duterte likes they have a very good relationship with President Abe. So logically, if you got kicked out.
So fallback option.
A fallback option kasi yun nga, the vacuum thing.
Yeah, and then you have Abe, who's very assertive in terms of making Japan a security partner.
And even he even went to the residence ni President Duterte.
Yeah, personal diplomacy.
Yeah, personal diplomacy. So he really took the
That's
effort.
an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was our argument. Okay, if they kick you out, ask Japan to come in.
Were there times that you were suddenly feeling maybe it's not as bad, because towards 2020, 2021, you could see even the president was kind of recalibrating, right? Kind of raising concerns about things were happening here. I mean, Duterte being Duterte will say 10,000 things in different ways, but my sense is in 2020, 2021, there was a kind of a softening, and we had friends telling me, actually, Edgar is beginning to be implemented. Maybe it did not happen as fast, but things were moving in the right direction. What is your understanding of that? That Duterte himself kind of realized, hindi gumagana yung ganyan style niya.
We're going to the political campaign that time. So it's all politics. That's my perception.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
if you go by the SWS and Pulse Asia surveys, before, during, and even after the political campaign, consistent siya eh.
People want more assertive stance on the West Philippine Sea.
80% want us to assert our sovereign rights.
More than 90% dun sa taking back islands and asserting arbitration.
And 80+% said we support the modernization of the Navy and the Coast Guard. Then in terms of trust rating of other countries, number 1 is US. Number 2 is Japan.
Australia,
Australia. At the bottom was China. So ibig sabihin, you're going to the political campaign as a very astute politician, alam mo yung sense on the ground. And I think
as a populist even,
a populist, and I think he recalibrated. He understood the sense on the ground.
And also the fact that China didn't give him any. I mean, I always said, forget about debt trap. It's pledge trap. It's like China makes pledges, nothing really came through. Not to mention, I mean, of course, you had the Reed Bank incident also in 2019, which I think really was a wake-up call for Duterte, that he's out of the... You know what I'm saying? Like, everyone is angry at China, and then he's the one trying to defend China or kind of play down. You could see that he also sensed like, wait, I think I'm ahead of the curve too much, right? In the wrong way. So I feel the 2019 events kind of made him realize, wait, parang alanganin itong situation. Because that kind of helped me appreciate. Although one version I get is the VFA was restored because because US gave us vaccines or something like that. But my understanding is that, of course, it's much more complicated than that. But the vaccine probably helped the president to kind of justify to himself that maybe we don't want to rock the VFA and all. You were worried about the VFA situation when it was being dangled as a possibility of a retaliation against US?
Hindi naman.
Hindi naman. You felt it's more positioning, posturing?
I give na natin, it was posturing. Kumaga, he was leverage.
For the ICC, I mean for the
for
human rights.
for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
exactly.
It was
Yeah.
leverage. And for that, I will give the kumbaga, there was a certain
There was a method to the madness.
Yeah,
See, okay. At least in fairness, I'm also willing to give him that. All
Yeah.
right. I won't say the whole thing was a master plan, but clearly there was some mini master plans going. I'm glad we're of the same thinking there. Now let's go to what really brought us together today. After that, no, because we have to understand this EDCA thing didn't come out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
The EDCA came in light of what happened in the Scarborough Shoal, right? The idea that we want to make sure that the Americans are a reliable partner. At least that's my understanding, because if you look at the preamble and the articles of the EDCA, it's very clear. We want the Americans to help the modernization of AFP. We share some strategic concerns with what's happening with China. I mean, if you really go textually with EDCA, that's the understanding I have, that both sides kind of understood the status quo was not sustainable, that the alliance had to upgrade, like go big or go home. But I know it also didn't go as big as we wanted, because I remember very well reporting on the EDCA. It was not even called EDCA, something else, right, later. The first iterations, I think the proposal by Albert Del Rosario and some of other people was, we wanted to even lease American frigates and assets as part of the EDCA deal, and then Obama said, no way, because we will be dragged, like these Filipinos will drag us in. In fact, it reminded me of what Kissinger was saying in the 1970s, when essentially there was another Nixon doctrine, which is, wag natin openly support ang Philippines sa South China Sea kasi madamay tayo.
Yeah.
So my understanding is EDCA was very much a kind of an offshot of Scarborough Shoal and its aftermath, regardless of what lessons we're drawing here. We were just desperate to bring them in. Now, obviously, for the first 2 years after EDCA, there was the Supreme Court issue to be resolved. That was resolved. But then comes Duterte, who is not for EDCA, or at least is not for weapons prepositioning part of EDCA, right? What is your understanding of EDCA? Do you think it was well negotiated? Do you think it's something that is best for the country? And then we'll discuss in the map shortly. Now we're talking about expanded EDCA even, right? Which is shocking for a lot of people who thought Marcos will be Duterte 2.0, right? He will finish off what Duterte started, which is, as critics put it, make us a province of China. What is your understanding of this? How did EDCA and then the Marcos pivot to the West come in together? How is your understanding of that convergence?
So you
in
have
a
to
way?
understand, though, EDCA evolved over time across 3 administrations.
Yep.
So the thought process for each administration iba.
Right.
And ang component kasi ng ating treaty are the VFA and the EDCA. The VFA is for yung troop presence.
Right.
The EDCA is for forwarding yung equipment nila. Kasi troops and equipment go together.
Right.
So
So you're saying EDCA is more about the weapons prepositioning and
Yeah.
all than the troops rotational access, whatever. Okay,
yeah, kasi
that's an interesting one.
if you go to the nuts and bolts of EDCA, it's all about facilities.
Facilities, yeah.
Inside Philippine bases. So we're not talking of US bases.
Correct.
They're not building US bases here in the Philippines. They're going to build a facility, a logistical facility or a transport facility within Philippine camps or bases. Yun yung context to.
Correct.
And that is to support yung troops that they come in that is nakatuck in under VFA.
Right.
So now it all goes to it's yung concept na yan is during the Reforger days at the height of the Cold War. Kumbaga, they preposition equipment, troops will just follow.
Correct.
So dito, it's just, we're talking of a warehouse, equipment naka-store doon. Then their troops can come in if contingency happens.
And they can put aircrafts, vessels, right? Electronic warfare, of those kinds of things, right?
Well, for that, I don't think, I'm not privy to yung level of specificity at this time. No? But at the time, it's just, we're talking of warehouses or storage facilities.
Storage for the weapons, ammunition, etc. Yeah. And how did you feel about Marcos going in the direction he's going? I mean, what is your understanding? Because for me, I don't buy this argument that Duterte put Marcos in a strategic sweet spot. But I would still argue that Marcos can potentially make the most out of the situation, can potentially even put us in a strategic sweet spot if we get the most out of this EDCA, and that will give us a leverage when we deal with China. Because my sense is you can't get nothing from China if you have no capabilities of on your own, if you're economically dependent on them, and you have no backing of anyone else. When you have some backing, some capabilities of your own, some diversified relations, then maybe we can make a better deal with China. But there's a counter argument to that, which is the genie's out of the bottle. The EDCA is going to bring us so deep into the American camp that goodbye with any engagement strategy towards China. Where do you stand on that? Because honestly, in my mind, I'm arguing for both sides. And I'm still not settled on that. So in academic parlance, are we still hedging or are we soft balancing, right? I mean, those are the terms we use in the academic world. And my sense is we are not still fully aligned with the US because we can still adjust some of the nitty-gritty details. We didn't give, I don't know, Mavulis or Fuga to the Americans, whatever. But I'm just giving an idea of some of the debates going on here, or at least some of the debates I'm having with myself. What is your understanding of that? Because can we pull out the map here? Because we're not only looking at the 5 pre-designated bases, we're looking at 4 additional ones, the red ones. They all have to do with maritime security, either West Philippine Sea or dealing with Taiwan. This looks, to some people, the Philippines has already aligned. I mean, I remember just the other day I was talking to a Malaysian taxi driver, Grab driver, was saying like, oh yeah, in the region, okay, I'm not gonna imitate the accent. In the region, Philippines and Singapore are kind of like deputy sheriff of America and ASEAN. Like, how do you read this? I mean, this looks, because at least in the 5 original one, may Mindanao ka, may Visayas ka, meron kang plausible deniability that this is not really about China, it's about ISIS, Daesh, whatever. But now, majority are facing West Philippine Sea and Taiwan. What's going on here?
I think that's a realization of yung geopolitical circumstances natin ngayon. And so if I juxtapose yung slide ko na this screen, yung screen picture to the one you presented earlier on yung EDCA sites.
Basis, yeah.
Makita mo yung I call this the Maritime. This is not my own so it's from my readings. Kumbaga, it depicts what we call the maritime axis of advance of China. Kumbaga, the extent of its maritime ambition. So there's a northern axis going to the Arctic Ocean. We are affected by the 2 axes of advance. The one in the middle is the advance from China going to the Mid-Pacific and to the South America. So it hit us where tatamaan tayo sa Luzon, Strait, Basi Channel.
Right.
And that's where I think the 3 new EDCA sites are located.
The Cagayan Isabela ones, right?
Yeah.
2 in Cagayan.
Yeah. And the other one is familiar naman tayo.
The
one going to West Philippine Sea or Calayan Island Group or Spratlys group of islands. That axis is going to Indian Ocean to Africa and Europe. Okay.
And this one also goes towards second island chain, right? In a sense, which that's where Philippine Sea and Benham Rise.
Yeah, it's pushing outward towards the second island chain.
Right.
Okay. Kaya this one is a concern for us kasi they have diplomatic forays already in the Solomon Islands.
Right.
We used to have a strategic rear. Ang strategic rear natin is yung East Coast natin Kasi we look at it, kumbaga walang problema dyan, typhoon lang problema natin dyan. Now, if nag-gain traction yung positioning ng China sa Solomon Islands,
South Pacific countries, which is a big issue for Australia and others too,
then wala na tayong strategic rear. Kumbaga,
where is the Solomon Islands? Is it this one?
Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, okay. So it's much closer to us then.
And ang fino-focus ng China are those islands that used to host Japanese or US bases during the Second World War.
Second World War, right? Yeah, the Pacific War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, mangyari niyan, we are going to be sandwiched between the first island chain construct nila and the second island chain.
Right. And this is the reason why because we always hear Philippines has a great geographical position. I'm saying like Yes and no. Actually, if you look at it in a way, we have the worst geographic position. We're squeezed between first and second island chain strategy of China.
Yeah,
right?
I call it now the curse of geography.
I mean, I didn't want to go that far, but it is in
It
a way.
is.
Or I would call it tyranny of geography, or geography of tyranny.
And that is something we have to accept.
Yeah.
Kumbaga, in the positioning of things, do we want to be the doormat of Asia? Is Asia?
That's
or,
one way of putting it. Yeah. I mean, we're double front line. I
Kaya
mean,
nga.
that's really not good.
So, we need to accept yung geopolitical and geographical circumstance natin as what it is. It's the nature of the beast. And craft
Right.
our maritime security posture accordingly. Now, yung trying to deny things will not solve the problem. Kasi kumbaga, when you say, okay, that's not intended for the South China Sea problem. We're trying to deny things.
Would you say the neutrality debate is kind of a denial of the reality that, oy, mag-neutral na lang tayo dyan, wala tayong ano dyan. The Harry Roca line, which is like, this is the intramurals of the giants, we don't have to do anything about it. Like, I find that kind of weird because we are a US treaty ally and we don't want to be dominated by China in these areas, right? I mean, what's going on there?
We need to step up. Okay, we need to accept our middle power stature.
Yeah, because we're not a small country. Our population is close to
Hindi.
Mexico's.
Yeah.
No one says Mexico is a small country, right?
But
Yeah.
I don't know kung baga is it an institutional or kung baga cultural inferiority complex
I
on our
think it's
part.
a cultural, psychological thing, yeah.
Yeah, but we need to get over that. We need to accept that we are a middle power,
Right.
and as a middle power, we have responsibilities.
And literally in the middle
Yeah,
of
in the
all
middle
of this,
also.
yeah.
And we don't have to be the small brother to the American big brother. We can plot our own course. Kumbaga, the US uses the hub and spokes
Right. The network
construct,
of allies it has,
okay? But we can use that same mechanism.
to our own advantage.
Yeah, kumbaga tayo Pilipinas becomes the hub.
Right.
And our relations with the US, Japan, Australia, other partners are the spokes.
Yeah.
But that means we need to step up and kumbaga build confidence among ourselves.
Yeah.
Na kaya natin dalhin yung hub na yun.
And a sense of agency that we're not just spectators here. We can do something about it. I mean, I always say everyone talks about AUKUS, but we have to talk about JAFUS, right? Japan, Philippines, US.
Yeah.
That's another important trilateral because if you look at Taiwan there in the map, it's squeezed, sandwiched in between Philippines and Japan, and both of us naval facilities very close to that. Before we go to the grand strategy again, can we go down to the granular level again? Is it significant that Mavulis and Fuga are perhaps kind of not part of EDCA, or they're too small and too in the front? Like, does that mean anything, or is it significant that Marcos initially was thinking Ilocos Norte for the Balikatan this year, but it was pushed to Zambales? Do you think that's more marginal, or that's actually more strategically consequential? That, or
Okay,
would the US be even interested in having access to Mavulis, considering it's just over 100 nautical miles? I mean, can't they develop that facility, make it large?
Number one, Mabulis is too small.
Too small. What about Fuga? Pretty large enough, isn't it?
Yeah, but actually I think the Fuga came into the conversation through Governor Mamba.
Right, who we'll talk about a bit more
so
later.
he said,
yeah.
okay, don't put the EDCA facility here, put it in Fuga Island. Fuga is very consequential kasi this is astride the Bashi Channel, no?
Right.
But it may be, again, too small.
Yeah. So you're saying Marcos did not put Fuga and Mavulis there not because the Americans are not interested, it's because it just doesn't make sense to be part of any major military infrastructure.
There's
build-up.
another consideration kasi rito It's more of a real estate issue Madaling i-offer yung facility, yung site if it's a military camp kasi national government or the armed forces owns that piece of real estate. But when you talk of, let's say, Fuga, that's a private,
The kind of a resort-ish.
so they're going to run into
expropriation.
the normal bureaucratic.
The expropriation,
Yeah.
that's it.
So-
where the LGUs will have a lot of power of giving a hard time
So
if they're not. I see what you're saying. That's a good
So,
point.
even if it's strategically significant, sabihin na natin strategically significant yung Fuga, but
It's
you're
a
going to
headache.
run into real.
It's a bureaucratic headache.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So it's a regulatory maze, if not minefield.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that if a war happens, perhaps some facilities will be open to some injured American troops or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Maybe like that. Na lang yung
We
context,
actually
yeah.
have a naval or marine detachment sa Fuga Island.
Exactly. That's why I
Yeah.
was asking about it.
Yeah.
And also in Mavulis, we're kind of trying to build some basic
It's
facilities.
basically a monitoring station.
Yeah,
But
okay.
those are militarily indefensible positions. Therefore,
Just as much as the Chinese fake islands in the South China Sea?
they're also militarily indefensible. They're a political statement. Kumbaga, in terms of real estate, yun yung muhon mo eh. That's your marker. Okay, this is the extent of my claim, and putting a facility there is my political statement that I'm not a passive actor. I'm a proactive actor.
Right.
And I will enforce or I will pursue my claim there. So yun yung ano doon, yun yung significance doon.
So you're saying we have already all the chips on the table? Is that what you're saying here? That by giving all of these bases, or sites rather, facilities to Americans, we are essentially aligned with them against China? Is that what you're saying? That there's no room for hedging here? Or is there still a room for edging? I mean, if you're China, you look at it and say, that's it. The Philippines has chosen. They're with the Americans, and we'll treat them accordingly. What is your take on this?
Again, I go back to my statement earlier. If we have the confidence to act as a middle power, then that is leverage.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Bargaining chip. Yeah.
That's a bargaining chip. Right now kasi ang nangyayari parang
We're leaving our fate to the others.
No, we're talking past each other.
You mean China or US?
China and us are talking past each other. Kasi
We'll do our own thing. You do your own thing. Bahala na. Tignan natin.
okay.
Oh,
So if you look
I
at
get
the
what you're saying.
yeah, if you look at the series of forums
good.
lately, no, I think I'm on to 4 or 5 forums na nangyayari. That's not a dialogue. That's them saying, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
So I feel hurt with what's happening in the Philippines right now. Okay. But hanggang doon lang yun eh. They're not doing anything to actually assuage yung situation.
Yeah, because this is what I'm saying, Admiral. The Chinese still have an option, right? If they lessen the bullying in the West Philippine Sea, offer us some concrete reassurances or any major concessions. You can think about many things, right? I don't know, allowing our fishermen better access to Scarborough Shoal, stopping the harassment and militia deployment. I mean, is there something that China can do here to make us think twice about the trajectory of our alliance with the United States? And is there room for the Philippines to tweak and dribble our EDCA alliance with the US? You get what I'm saying? Because, okay, we're both on the same page. This could be a bargaining chip. But bargaining chip means that there's a room for maneuver. What is the room for maneuver here? What can China do and what can we do to make the most out of this situation without us being completely dragged into the American camp, being their deputy sheriff?
Meron 2 contexts that we need to put into play. Number one, my sense is they have actually pushed themselves into the corner in terms of
The Chinese, you mean? Yeah.
flexibility of policy. Kasi there are times that when they hyperventilate in terms of yung expressing their anger or ano.
It's a rising superpower thing, yeah.
They're not talking to us.
Yeah.
They're talking to
the Americans.
No,
To
their
themselves, to
to
their
their
own,
domestic public.
Posturing. Wolf warrior diplomacy.
Domestic posturing sila. Akala lang natin tayo yung kausap nila, but hindi talaga. So that's one. So they don't have that, domestically, they may no longer have that flexibility to shift or to recalibrate. Pangalawa naman, they may not have, baka wala silang respeto sa atin.
I don't think it's a baka thing. It's very clear, right? Duterte gave them everything, and
Yeah.
what did they give us in exchange? Obviously, they don't take us
So,
seriously.
siguro, for us, the first thing that we need to do is, we need to level up. Again, we need to develop the confidence to become a middle power so that we will be respected. So, how can you dialogue with a person you do not respect?
But don't you think this will make us look even more like China's US protectorate in the eyes of the Chinese? Like, ayan pala kayo eh, talagang ganyan lang kayo eh. Don't you think it makes it worse even for the Chinese say, you guys are not really in charge of your own country, you're giving up all your bases to the Americans. At least with Duterte, he was kind of the mayor in charge of the town. You get what I'm saying? Like, it kind of can backfire, right? Because if the Chinese stick to their caricature of the Philippines, this is perfect bias, confirmation, right? Like, see, Filipinos, they're not really their own country. They're just here. That's my concern here. Na parang, wait lang, baka naman we're going too far in the other direction under Marcos Jr. That really leaves no room for any proper negotiation with the Chinese.
That's a very good point. But the next step is, while we restore the alliance with the United States, we should also look at other strategic partners, Japan,
Diversification,
Australia.
exactly.
You diversify.
Correct.
Kasi, again, I go back to my construct of the hub and spokes. If we think like a hub, then we need to expand. Hindi pwedeng one hub lang, which is Philippine-US.
Yes, yeah.
You look at other hubs.
Spoke to spoke.
Yeah, and we are the center of we are the hub of that.
Yeah.
And ang concept dyan would be, ang driver ng hub mo is defining what is our national interest. Kasi dito ang problema, I think, yung national interest natin should be something that is not open to interpretation. And it is something that is everybody understands on a basic level.
Right.
But if we start debating on what is our national interest, that means we never really had an understanding or discernment na we are on the same page as far as interest.
Right.
Kumbaga, there's no such thing as national interest. So that is something also that we need to work on.
And also make sure the EDCA gives us the equipment and training that we need to become a credible middle power, also militarily, right?
Yeah.
I think the Philippines is already middle power diplomatically. I think economically, we're almost $1 trillion. We're going to be $1 trillion economy in the next 10 years. But militarily, my sense is we still have to. I mean, I think we're among few major ASEAN countries that doesn't still have a squadron of real modern fighters. We only have upgraded FA-50 fighters. But so obviously, there's a lot of catch up to do. But you're optimistic that if we play our cards, or cautiously optimistic that we can make this EDCA a kind of a linchpin for modernization of the AFP, to make us a credible middle. Because you cannot be a middle power just by the size of your population or economy, right? You have to have a decent military, right? Especially Navy and Air Force in the case of the Philippines.
Number one, let's build our strategic culture in government.
Which we mentioned a while ago.
Yeah. Pangalawa, if you build on that, then the next step would be, you need to be strategized.
Right.
Kumbaga, you don't, anong nangyari kasi right now, we are reacting to situations eh.
Right.
We're not ahead of the game. We're just playing along or tagging along. Now, to be a respectable middle power, you have to be ahead of the game.
Right.
Kumbaga, yung paggamit mo ng tools of statecraft mo are astute.
Now let's go to the final part of our discussion. I mean, there's so much to discuss. But you see what's happening here, right? I'm having already debates inside my head. It's like, anong next step eh? Kasi I think everyone's wondering, wala na, tumaya na tayo, tapos na. Yung iba naman, wala yan, maraming pang pwedeng plot twist mangyari. I mean, there are many ways to look at it. I can sense even our Chinese counterparts also are kind of confused about how bad is this situation, right? And what they can do next. But now let's assume this. Let's assume the Chinese look at this and say, I think the Philippines need some reminders about who's the big powers in this part of the world. And I think that inevitably brings us to this discussion of a whole-of-nation approach, right? Because you cannot be a real middle power if you're not preparing your whole country to come together. I mean, the first time I heard about this whole-of-nation approach was actually in an Australian defense paper that came a decade ago or something, that in dealing with China and Asia, they have to have a whole-of-nation approach. Universities should be on board, business sector, hindi lang military and government. Do you have a sense that we also have to be prepared for that? I mean, I used to be based in Taiwan before as a visiting scholar. So one of the things that I always noticed with Taiwan, at least with the Tsai Ing-wen administration, was they wanted to prepare their whole country in hybrid warfare with China. So as much as they are preparing for kinetic warfare, they already had to do with influence operations, right? So I know you have been doing a lot on influence operations, how authoritarian superpowers who have a lot of money, right, can use that money or investments and all to influence a lot of people, including LGU leaders in other countries. In fact, that's one reason I was skeptical of federalism. Is like, federalism can do two very damaging things: strengthen warlords and dynasties, and it strengthen warlords and dynasties aligned to hostile powers, right? Like, we're not gonna name drop here, but like, we have weird situation of some governor here saying like openly with China and all of that. No, so can you tell us a little about influence operation or sharp power, right? How serious is this threat? And China obviously can also have other ways of reminding the Philippines who's the big boy in this part of the world. Cyber, right? Our critical infrastructure, like your national grid natin, ilang % yung hawak ng Chinese counterpart, their engineers. You know what I'm saying? Like, I look at it and part of me is saying, fine, I think Marcos Jr. is doing some correction,
to Duterte, but at the same time, like, does he realize what preparation we need if we're really going to go in that direction? What is your advice in this regard? How serious is the influence operation issue? Could you explain to us what's up with this whole influence operation, sharp power? That's the term we use. Because everyone knows hard power, which is military, etc. But what about the sharp power? What's going on there?
Okay, basic first problem natin is we have framed the problem as a hard power issue.
Right. Military.
Military to military.
Yeah.
So that we know. Kumbaga,
Correct.
we are distracted from yung what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. Kumbaga, all our energies, all our resources are looking at, okay, how do I address the problem? But China operates at different levels. And one of them is yung combination of yung 1-2 punch. The hard power and the sharp power. So, here in this slide...
Just to be clear, sharp power is different from soft power because soft power is more like attraction of your culture. K-pop, Hollywood, right?
Okay,
Sharp power is weaponization of economic resources and diplomatic resources, informational resources, right? Because many people know hard power and soft power, what Joseph Nye was talking about. But sharp power is a new category that has been introduced into the discourse over the past 3-4 years.
Okay, my distinction there between soft and sharp power is if you use the vector of public diplomacy, let's say just focus lang public diplomacy. In the context of soft power, ang objective mo from a public diplomacy perspective is to engage another country and to show the best features of your culture and to enhance yung people-to-people relations. Okay, that's the
soft power
context of public diplomacy.
Right.
If you look at it from the point of view of sharp power,
you weaponize that.
I use public diplomacy to interfere in the domestic politics of another country and to find ways and means to influence the elites of that country so that they will more or less subscribe to yung policies or yung intentions ko and eventually be supportive of my strategic interests. So medyo sabihin na natin medyo selfish yung interest nun. Kumbaga, it's
I mean, you're essentially weaponizing soft power, right? I mean, just to give an example for people to understand what we're talking about, like, it's for instance, like going out there and, trying to make friends with some governor or LGU leaders and kind of make them argue against EDCA in ways you would argue against EDCA, right? Or make some YouTube video about West Philippine Sea as a shared sea and that, China, Philippines, harmony, forget about UNCLOS, forget about your rights. Kind of misinformation, right? But it's kind of soft power-ish looking. So it looks soft power, but actually it's something more than that. Because soft power could be economic investments, just general cultural production. But sharp power is when actually those have more ulterior motives, right?
Sharp power manifests in what we call political warfare. Okay? And political warfare has different vectors or different ways of doing things. Okay? So one of them is what we call subnational engagement.
Right.
Meaning, you not only look at engaging the national government, pati yung local government i-engage mo. And ang mangyayari niyan, if successful ka sa subnational engagement mo, that local branch of government will end up going against central government.
Right.
Yung policy direction ng central government. And there are ways of doing that. Meron akong despite this opposition or controversy on EDCA, ang sinasabi ko is, the Chinese have their own version of EDCA. Ang tawag doon, Belt and Road Initiative.
Right.
Okay? Kasi if you look at it sa endpoint niya, ano yung objective doon, pareho lang naman eh. Okay?
But no Chinese troops are going to be on Philippine soil, right? They're not going to put PLA.
But you have to go back to yung strategy ng China. There is what they call civil-military fusion in terms of strategy.
Right.
Meaning, everything is dual use. When I invest in your province and put up a port and probably find a way na yung port na yon is 99-year lease of a state-owned Chinese company who happen to have links with the People's Liberation Army, like what happened to Darwin in Australia.
Or Sri Lanka, the Hambantota.
So, sa akin, case study ko, Darwin talaga. Kasi
Darwin.
talagang outright state-owned, PLA connection,
Yeah.
okay, very strategic port.
Location, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's Australia's gateway to the Indian Ocean.
Right.
Okay, so if you use that as a model or case study, yun yung potential na pwede mangyari. Now, putting away malice in our local government official, kumbaga, you assume regularity in the way they responded to that circumstance. Kumbaga,
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, there are legitimate concerns with Edgar. I just want to be fair to Governor, in Cagayan, Isabel, that there are reasons to be uncomfortable. There are concerns. Kasi we had American troops, abuses happen. So we're not here dismissive of some legitimate concerns.
Correct.
But you will be naive to assume that it's only legitimate concerns that is driving some of the criticism going on here, right?
ang problem natin is, in terms of awareness, mababa yung, almost zero yung awareness natin in terms of political warfare or sharp power.
Yeah, I mean, only you and I have been talking about sharp power. How many, even among scholars, I don't hear many people talking about sharp power.
So, the fact na hindi siya part of the public
Mainstream
discourse
discourse,
natin,
yeah.
wag na lang public discourse.
Public policy discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not even talked about, that means you're not aware of it.
Right.
So, yung appreciation mo dito, to be fair to them, it's a purely an investment. And I need to take care of my investment because that investment produces jobs.
Right.
At the local level. So I could understand yung nila, yung hesitation nila or yung situation nila. Okay.
Or concerns about the environment or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's my point. Like, something can be legitimate, but also can be weaponized by external powers and their proxies here in the Philippines, right? That's what I'm saying. No one talks about it. It's either or. Either ano to, or you know what I'm saying. And my feel is, when you look at it, there are 50 shades of ways by China and other powers to influence us. The same way the US was influencing us in nefarious ways during the Cold War period, etc.
Isa pa kasi yung aspect dito is natural sa atin to look at power in terms of geopolitical context.
Right.
But China is operating at a different level, yung geo-economic sphere. That
yung
means,
statecraft nila.
sa statecraft nila, economics is part of yung strategic design nila.
Exactly. They're not separated.
Hindi wala
There's no
siya.
innocent investment, big ticket. Yeah.
It's one big continuum. So when we talk of yung dimensions of national power or tools of statecraft, diplomacy, propaganda, economic strategy, and military strategy supports each other.
Right.
In our context, kasi westernized yung appreciation natin, naka-stovepipe yan.
Kasi, market economy, so if a Chinese company, they're a private company, they have nothing to do. And then but if you followed the reason I'm asking is this because, remember, one big issue is the 2017 National Intelligence Law passed in China, right? And if you look at some of the provisions, I don't want to be unfair, but some of the provisions are kind of problematic, right? Some of the provisions kind of almost imply that at some point, if the national government called on private citizens and companies, they have to contribute to national intelligence security. Isn't that worrying in itself?
Actually, there are several laws. There's the cryptography law nila,
Exactly,
counterterrorism law, of course, the national intelligence law.
And also, more and more of efforts to kind of put commissars almost in the board of big companies, right? Especially state-owned companies. But we see also with big tech companies in China, suddenly big moves are happening. So this is not a normal capitalist system whereby, I don't know, this is not like Facebook Meta operating. Because I always hear that, paras lang naman sila. No, they're not. Facebook doesn't operate under Pentagon, right? But in China, if the government is angry, any moment they can just take over or kind of influence directly the operations of their
problem sa China, nag-shift sila ngayon from yung private companies which sprung up during Deng Xiaoping and the succeeding
all the way to Hu
Jintao,
Jintao,
Jiang Zemin. They're shifting back to
state control,
state-owned enterprises. So they're killing the private sector nila, or slowly killing their private sector.
Who used to be, Jack Ma was a fantastic entrepreneur.
So what happened to him now? So siya yung kumbaga,
I think he's in Japan, right? Yeah.
Yung icon of how
entrepreneurship.
They try to kill private sector na. So state-owned enterprises, by the nature of the beast, may party cell yan sa loob. Okay.
Commissar.
Yeah. May political officer yan. And there's a party cell that is either the one running the enterprise or running with the enterprise.
Thank you very much for that, Admiral. Now, to end our talk, because this is about the view from Manila, because we see a lot of people talking about geopolitics in this part of the world. Sometimes it's the Chinese view, sometimes it's the Western view, but what we try to do in this show is the Filipino view of looking at things. Now, if you were the National Security Advisor or something like that, what would be your advice to President Marcos Jr.? Because President Marcos Jr. is saying, don't worry about it, hindi gagamitin yan for offensive, itong mga Edgar bases and all. And my sense is that, no, actually it could be used for, in an event of war escalation. So my sense is maybe the President has to be more honest about some of the risk here while making sure there's no unnecessary panic. But if you were the National Security Advisor, what would be the advice? If you had some say in shaping of the Philippine strategic culture, what will be advice? What will be the best whole-of-nation approach? And what will be also the best strategic decision-maker approach to dealing with the reality that we talked about? The Philippines is a middle power and is in the middle of powers, right?
Okay.
Competing powers, yeah.
Now, first off, to put context, I think for all the criticisms kay President Marcos, I think he has a very astute sense of yung geopolitical reality natin.
Because he has been in this for a long time.
Yeah.
He was 1974 already in Beijing.
And I think in the way things are running, as far as national security conversation is concerned, I think he's well ahead of the pack in terms of understanding it. So
Interesting.
he doesn't need advice. What he needs actually from his national security team
It's
is
encouragement.
support.
Yeah, exactly.
Support.
Exactly.
Kasi anong nangyari, he's running the marathon.
Yeah.
And he's already in the midst, halfway, the 21st mile of the 42.
Yeah, exactly.
And
He needs
nasa
push.
starting stage pa lang yung his team. So they need to catch up.
Right.
So it's not a matter
That's
of
a good, interesting way of putting it.
it's not a matter of yung national security team advising the president. I think the president has a
He has a vision.
he understands what's happening and actually kung titingnan mo siya ang driver of the things that's happening now.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, because usually he gets dismissed, right? Marcos Jr. He's just, traveling all around the world. No, but my sense always was he has a strong, and my sense is he was always in the shadow of his father, who was quite astute on foreign policy. I mean, I'm not a fan of Marcos Sr.'s, some of his domestic policies, definitely not the human rights violation issue, but I think on foreign policy, Marcos Sr. had a smart way of approaching multi-vector, dealing with multiple powers and all. My sense is the son learned a lot from the father, and I kind of confirm that people who know Marcos Jr. very well.
Yeah, so he had the proper exposure. And
Right. At the highest
right
level.
or wrong, he had a mentor,
Yeah.
yung father niya.
The father niya, yeah.
So, yun yung doon. So, it's not an issue of the advising him. It's,
the intelligence part. It's the emotional support, the moral support.
he needs support and they need to catch up.
Right. That's a very good way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Admiral. Retired Rear Admiral Ong. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Very kind of you. Parang kulang ang 2 hours, no? I think we need
3-4
go
hours.
for 4 hours, 5 hours and all. Thank you very much for that. So catch us again next week on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. I am Richard Heydarian, and that is The View from Manila. We are One News, all sides, all the time.